On March 22nd, 1518, while he was in Valladolid, Charles signed an agreement with a refugee from Portugal that was to solve the greatest mystery of his time, the size and shape of the earth. The Portuguese who came to offer his services to Charles was a short, stocky, black-bearded man who walked with a limp. His Portuguese name, Fernão de Magalhães, was to become Ferdinand Magellan, as he changed his allegiance from Portugal to Spain. This change was due to bitterness and disappointment. Magellan was in his late 30s. He had served King Manuel of Portugal for 7 years in the Indies, yet he had received no reward or recognition whatsoever. Not only that, he had been told by the king that, in spite of all his experience, there would be no further place for him in the service of Portugal. For a year after being dismissed by King Manuel, Magellan had stayed on in Portugal, maturing a plan that was in his mind. He worked in the king's library, where he had access to all the secret charts, sailing directions, and logbooks of the latest expeditions to Brazil. For now the coast of South America had been explored as far south as the Rio de la Plata. One of the best of these secret maps had been drawn by Martin Beheim, who had made the earth apple in Nuremberg. For some years before his death in 1507, Beheim had been employed as mapmaker for the King of Portugal. On Beheim's map, Magellan had seen what he was certain was the Passo, or strait, leading through to India. As Magellan appeared before Charles and his privy council, his assurance impressed all: the Flemish Cardinal Adrian, the Duke of Chevreuse, the Spanish Cardinal Fonseca, as well as the young king himself. Magellan had brought with him a slave Enrique from the Moluccas and a slave woman from Sumatra, the first people from the Far East to be seen in Spain, which was also impressive. Although the exact location was not shown on the globe which he brought with him, the explorer convinced his hearers that he had sure knowledge of where the strait lay. Magellan was asked to make a written statement of his proposals, and Charles I agreed to equip 5 ships and to provide the crew with enough food and artillery to last 2 years. Magellan was to have 1/20 of all the income to be derived from the venture. Due to Charles's unexpected interest, arrangements for the expedition began without the usual delay. On March 22, 1518, the agreement was signed. On August 10, 1519, Magellan and his 5 ships sailed from Seville on their voyage round the world. By that time, Charles and his council in court were in Barcelona. An epidemic was raging in Barcelona when Charles arrived, so he took up residence in a castle a few miles away. In the nearby village was a church where he and the members of his court attended Mass. One Sunday, a Franciscan friar who had recently returned from Hispaniola was invited to preach the sermon. What he told about the cruel oppression of the natives so impressed young Charles that he asked the friar to be present at an audience which he was to hold a few days hence on that very subject. As the friar entered the hall of the palace, he found himself in a most distinguished company, all titled men of the church or state, except one. That one was Bartolomé de Las Casas, the well-known apostles to the Indians. As they took their places, the friar was on the far side of the circle facing the king's throne, the members of the panel seated around. The Bishop of Cabido took no notice of the lowly friar, keeping his head proudly turned away. The meeting opened with ceremony. With most meticulous regard for etiquette, the Chancellor and Chevreuse each knelt on one knee to confer with Charles and be apprised of his desire. It was then announced that His Majesty desired that Bishop Cabido speak first. Bishop Cabido replied in a haughty tone that he wished to speak to His Majesty in private. It was evident that he felt above entering into any discussion or conversation with the lowly friar, next to whom it was his misfortune to be seated. Charles insisted, saying that everyone there had come upon invitation. So, forced to do so, the bishop, after introducing himself, gave his devastating appraisal of the natives. Sire, the Catholic king, your grandfather, having desired to make a settlement on the mainland of the Indies, petitioned the Holy Father to make me the first bishop of that colony. As to the natives of the country, I say that they are slaves by nature. Las Casas, who asked to speak next, took fire at the bishop's last remark, but controlled himself enough to begin calmly. Most powerful and most high lord and king, I am one of the oldest immigrants to the Indies, where I saw with my own eyes the cruelties inflicted on those peaceful and gentle people. Those people of the New World are not only capable of understanding the Christian religion, but also of practicing good morals and the highest virtues. The Bishop of Capito has told you that they are slaves by nature. Our holy religion adapts itself to all nations of the world. It embraces them all and deprives no human being of his natural liberty under the pretext that he or she is servus a natura, a slave by nature, as the bishop, if I understood him, would have you believe. His Catholic Majesty, your grandfather, promised me that measures would be taken to correct the evils. But he died, and his royal will in behalf of the natives was frustrated. I next applied to Cardinal Ximenes and also to Cardinal Adrian. They acted promptly, but the persons sent to execute the laws proved unfit for the task. When I heard that your Majesty had come to Spain, I hastened to renew my representations to you. The friar spoke next. He told how he had had to take a census of Hispaniola, and what a shocking percentage of native people had perished. I beg and beseech your Majesty to put a stop to that torrent of crime and murdering people, that the anger of God may not fall upon us all. Diego Columbus, the governor, was called upon last. It was not an easy situation for the governor. Although he himself had made no vast fortune out of mistreating the natives, the evils had been perpetrated with his knowledge, if not with his active approval. He made no attempt to excuse or defend himself, but out of an innate sense of justice asked Charles to intervene. Sire, the crimes which have been and are yet perpetrated in the Indies, of which these reverend fathers have spoken, are well known. Priests and friars, as you see, have come here to denounce them. However much your Majesty may suffer by the destruction of those people, I shall suffer more, because even though all your dominions beyond the seas should be lost, you would still be a great lord, whereas I would be left without possessions of any kind. Therefore, I came to inform the Catholic King Ferdinand, may he rest in peace, and I am waiting on your Majesty now to beg you to please to look into this weighty affair and find a remedy for these evils. And so the meeting ended. Afterwards, Las Casas told Governor Columbus about his latest plan for an Indian reservation in South America, which he hoped the king would approve. All of Las Casas' efforts were now centered on saving the natives in South America, since it was too late to save the natives on Hispaniola in the islands. 3/4 of those gentle, friendly people had been wiped out. Las Casas now planned to establish a reservation on the Gulf of Venezuela where the natives would be protected and taught. He knew that Columbus had come to Spain to see about the lawsuit regarding the hereditary title of viceroy and the larger income promised to his father. Since there was no prospect of this being settled soon, Las Casas suggested a plan by which Diego might increase his own income and also help with the expense of the reservation. He was to ask the king for the exclusive right of trading with the natives of South America, promising in return to erect fortresses and maintain soldiers to protect the natives on the reservation while the friars taught and converted them. Diego said he would take the proposal to his brother Ferdinand, who was a scholar and whose opinion he held in very high regard. Ferdinand's advice was that Diego should also ask that the governorship be vested in him and his heirs forever. This was practically the same thing as acquiring a hereditary title of viceroy, so the whole proposal was rejected. Las Casas' general plan for the natives' reservation, however, was given royal approval. It was agreed that he should have 260 leagues of coastal region in Venezuela to try out his experiment. The agreement was signed by the king on May 9, 1520, at Cortuna. The next day, Charles sailed from Spain, bound for Germany, where in the past 3 years tremendously important events had been taking place. Events that would change his own life in the world in which he lived.